Because, you know, the Chinese just mentioned yesterday that they were getting a little concerned about all the money they loaned us, and that just maybe we won't pay them back. You know, I'm sure they're a lot more than just a little concerned, because that's what they said publicly. Imagine what they're saying privately, because they know we're not going to pay them back. Of course we're not going to pay the Chinese back their money. It's impossible. We can't possibly. And can you imagine, if President Obama, you know, given the following type of speech to the American citizens, to say, go national televised address and say, you know, my fellow Americans, I've got a little news for you today. We're going to have a massive across-the-board tax increase on average working Americans. Any American that still has a job is going to have to pay much higher income taxes. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have to cut Social Security across the board. If you're getting a Social Security check, we're going to have to reduce it. And remember all my plans about more education and health care for everybody and, you know, energy independence? We got to put all those plans on hold because the Chinese need their money. We borrowed a lot of money from the Chinese, and we're good for our debts. You know, they worked hard for that money, and they loaned it to us, and we're going to pay it back. Now, that's going to require a big sacrifice on our part. Does anyone think that we're going to do that? What, are they kidding me? You know what we're going to tell the Chinese? We're going to say, you guys are predators, predatory lenders. We need a modification program. We need to cram down on this. You never should have lent us all this money. You know we can't pay it back. It's not our fault. The Chinese know this. The Chinese, they can't even vote in our elections. Why are we going to care what they think? We're going to tax voters to pay non-voters? So the Chinese know they're in this box. The U.S. government, we don't pay our bills. We're like Bernie Madoff, right? People loan us money. How do we pay it back? We borrow more. Right? If somebody came to Bernie Madoff a couple years ago and wanted their money, they got it. Why did they get it? Because they were able to take in new money. They found another sucker who didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme. Same thing the U.S. government does. Every time a bond matures, we just go sell another one. And every time we need to pay interest on the national debt, we go borrow that too. Well, it works until nobody wants to lend us any more money. Then we're going to have to default, just like Bernie did. And there's only two ways we can default. We just legitimately don't pay, or we print money. That's it. There's only two ways to repudiate your debt. There's no way we're going to pay the debt. The Chinese have to know that. And we're going to figure that out. But anyway, let me get back to it. I keep going off on too many tangents. But, all right, so the free market, that's where I was, the free market was getting the blame for a problem that was created by the government. And what's happening now, of course, is the government is using this economic crisis that they caused to get even bigger, to grow their power, to expand, to come to our rescue, to save us from the evil forces of capitalism with government, with socialism. And, when you listen to Barack Obama, I listened to his most recent speech, and a lot of what he said was true. He talked about the fact that we need a genuine economy. We can't have a false prosperity. We can't have a prosperity based on debt and spending. We need to have a sound foundation. All that was true. But then, of course, everything else he said is wrong. He wants the U.S. economy to have a sound foundation, but he wants to be the one that builds it. He thinks the government can erect a sound foundation, that central government planning can replace the market, that resources can be allocated efficiently by politicians who want to get votes, as opposed to entrepreneurs who are looking for profits. Right? He wants to replace the invisible hand with the hand of the state, and he thinks that he could do it better. The problem is, sure, we had a phony economy. That's true. We had a phony economy because of the government undermined our productive capacity, undermined our ability to save, undermined our ability to manufacture, and nurtured and cultivated the consumer bubble, the service sector economy that we had that's now collapsed. And it's not government that's going to restore it. We need free market forces. The government right now, everything that they're doing, what is the government trying to do right now? They want to bail people out and they want to stimulate. Well, the bailouts are the worst thing that you can do because they want to bail out companies that should fail, that should be bankrupted. Bankruptcy is a good thing. It's the way the market cleanses the economy of companies that shouldn't be there. Why shouldn't they be there? Because they're not generating profits. They are not effectively utilizing resources. Those resources need to be freed up. Right now they're being held hostage. We need to free them up so that we can use them productively. You know, they say, oh, we can't let General Motors go bankrupt because some auto workers will be unemployed. Well, I mean, we don't want work just so we can have a job. We want work because we can produce something. We want the value, right? I mean, if somehow, we can all have like little machine and we could just push little buttons and whatever we wanted would magically appear, right? Nobody would have to work, right? And the government, of course, would try to outlaw those gadgets because it would create a lot of unemployment. But who would care? We wouldn't need employment. We would have everything we want. So we work because we want stuff, not because we want to work. So just to preserve jobs doesn't make any sense if they're not productive, if they're not efficient. Now, I can understand why some of the auto workers would want to preserve their jobs if they're being overpaid. I certainly can understand why a lot of these executives want to preserve their jobs. But society doesn't want to do it. The government shouldn't be doing it. We need to let companies go bankrupt. And when I talk about letting, General Motors go bankrupt, and of course, I was predicting that they would go bankrupt 5 or 6 years ago. I knew they couldn't survive. But if we let them go bankrupt, does that mean it's an end to the automobile industry? Does that mean that all those plants in Detroit or in the Detroit area are just going to sit idle? That all those skilled workers are just going to sit there and nobody is going to try to hire them? Of course not. What would happen if we let General Motors go bankrupt is that some entrepreneurs would step up and buy up the assets out of bankruptcy, and they would no longer be encumbered with big labor union contracts or health care obligations or interest on debt. They would be able to buy the assets without the liabilities and organize them in such a way to make cars profitably. Now, in order to do that, they would probably have to pay their workers a lot less than workers are being paid now, but at least they'd be working for companies that made cars profitably. And we'd probably end up with a lot more people working in the automobile industry than we have today. And the fact of the matter is, rather than making cars for Americans, we should be making cars to export. Because Americans, we don't really need any car. We have too many cars. I mean, we have, 2 or 3 cars per household at this point? I mean, when the president makes a speech and he says, we need to restore credit. He keeps saying credit is the lifeblood of the economy. We need credit so Americans can go out and buy more cars. I mean, you can look at the United States and say, what's wrong with our economy? We don't have enough cars. We need more cars. I mean, that's the last thing we need. Now, we need to make cars. We know why we need to make cars because there's a lot of people in China that are still on bicycles. They need cars. We should be able to make cars for them and export them. We don't need them for ourselves because we own too many cars. We have too much everything. If you ever seen some of these commercials, or not commercials, these television, the news stories, where when they foreclose on houses, they send these companies in and they got to, clean the places out and get them ready, And it's amazing to me, but they would go to these houses that people abandoned and they're full of stuff. I mean, the TV sets are there. The stereos are there. There's clothes in the closets. Why didn't these people take that stuff? They didn't even want it. I mean, we got all this stuff and it doesn't even matter. They just didn't even care about it. And all this stuff, of course, was bought with borrowed money. We didn't make any of it. We didn't have any money to pay for any of it. The last thing Americans need is to buy more stuff.